Hello, ladies and gentlemen. As you are all aware, I posted a video last night involving well, what I see the complicity of the YouTube atheist community in the malfeasance of one Dr. Phil Mason. However, some of the information contained within that video has since been called into question by myself, True Puka, pragmatic uselessness, sorry, which I will link his video in the low bar to this, that made us doubt that the veracity of some of the claims were being made could be held up to scrutiny. So, in the interest of making sure that that bad information didn't get out again, I privated the video. However, I want to address the situation that I was addressing in that video and discuss it now. The general thrust of this is going to be involving the YouTube atheist community and their defense of Phil Mason for what he has done, doing, and continues to do in terms of claiming that somehow they're defending free speech in science like this. And this is something that keeps coming up over and over again. We are defending his free speech. His free speech matters more than anything. But here's the problem with all this, and let's get to the meat and potatoes of it right now. Firstly, the United States First Amendment applies to U.S. citizens. I do not believe Phil Mason is a U.S. citizen, and he sure as hell is not in the United States right now to have that First Amendment protection. Secondly, it seems that some people believe that the UN Charter on Human Rights applies everywhere. It should, but it doesn't. So you are arguing a point about freedom of speech that is really null and void. Also, there seems to be a tendency among people like Noel Plum in particular to make the claim that if you defend the idea of something like hate speech in the Czech Republic, you are defending the idea of the vlogger who was flogged in Saudi Arabia. This is a false equivalency. First of all, the reason that those laws exist in Eastern Europe and Western Europe is because of the nature of the Holocaust itself. That event is what causes these laws to be on the books. It is unique to that area and to the situation that evolved out of it. That's why they exist. This is a sovereign country who is allowed to decide its own laws and how those laws are put forward in terms of how they are used. This is a basic belief in the Western world also, that people have the right to go after their own autonomy. A country has the right to enact its own laws, its own styles of jurisprudence, everything along with it. That is a right that we have afforded every country in Europe also. And no, the EU statutes do not overcome that. Also, I want to point this out too. Since this is a false equivalency, let's remember that in Saudi Arabia, the tradition we have there is Wahhabism and everything that stems from that. Clean Shore has talked at length about this on his blog and in his videos, and for some inexplicable reason, everybody keeps ignoring what he has to say. So I will link his channel, and I will try to get his blog linked in this also, along with the videos that I linked in the other videos so that people can actually get a look at them at this point. So, this false equivalency when it comes to defending free speech isn't flying. And the idea of this free speech seems to be selectively heard when it comes to this kind of thing. It has come to my attention recently that when the Venom Fang X debacle was going on, apparently Venom Fang X lost his job at the video store because it was brought to their attention that he was engaging in distributing these CDs of Ken Hovind's I don't remember exactly what the series was, to customers who were coming into the store, and he lost his job for this, and apparently later it was revealed in some of the chats that Dr. Phil Mason was complicit in this and may have even caused it. I find this fascinating that this event occurred and nobody seemed particularly concerned with it at the time. So when I hear people sit there and talk about defending Phil Mason's freedom of speech and that he shouldn't lose his job over something that he has said, it sounds like the most disingenuous pile of shit that could come out of the group of people who are defending him at this point. Nobody cared when it was Venom Fang X because he was your ideological enemy, and therefore he was getting what he deserved. That brings me to this idea about Phil Mason at this point. Now, according to Phil's own logic, and he has done this routinely, and we have the video evidence of him saying this, he concluded that women who get raped for various reasons, including that they dress a certain way, they act a certain way, they give off body language that says, I'm a victim. And that if they go out, they get drunk, they give off this body language, they dress a certain way. If this is what they do, they are responsible for what happened to them, or partially responsible for what happened to them. But actually what he's talking about is they are fully responsible for what happened to them, because they were the ones who caused this. They were the ones who were responsible for their own rape, because they were the ones who dressed a certain way, acted a certain way, gave off certain body language, and therefore they are responsible. So let's take Phil Mason's logic and apply it now to the same situation that we have in the Czech Republic at this point. Phil Mason said that it's their fault if they do this. So if Phil Mason goes to a country where there are laws on the books that prevent people from minimizing, sort of denying and or doing something else with the Holocaust, and he breaks those laws, he is responsible for what happened by his own logic. According to him, he is responsible. It's the same logic of his rape apologetics applied to his status in the Czech Republic. He is responsible for breaking the law there. Now, it doesn't matter if you agree with those laws or not. That is irrelevant. Those are the laws that are on the books. And this sovereign country has a right to prosecute him as a result of that. So all we do is take Phil Mason's logic to its logical conclusion, and there you have it. Phil Mason is responsible for anything that happens to him in the Czech Republic, including to and up to his losing his job for saying stupid things. If he didn't want that to happen, he shouldn't have said those things. If he didn't want it to happen, he shouldn't have posted it online. If he didn't want it to happen, he shouldn't have gone to the Czech Republic where he knew these rules were in place. He was asking for it. The same way that, according to him, if a woman dresses in a short skirt, she's asking to be raped. Or if she gives off body language, of which nobody can explain to me what this body language is, that says I'm a victim, she is going to be raped. Or she drinks, or she leaves the house, or she has contact with a fellow human being, she is going to deserve it. That's why this whole discussion that was going on in the other video is the most disingenuous thing I've ever heard. Phil Mason has said some of the worst and most reprehensible things over the last 5 years that really a scientist could say, even though I call him scientist only in the sense that he's followed all the forms. He's not really a very good scientist. That's obvious. He doesn't have the critical thinking skills to do it. He doesn't have the questioning nature. He doesn't even really care if he's in the lab, which is not indicative of a scientist who really enjoys their work. It just sounds like somebody who's going through the motions. It's a job. And what I've seen in the atheist community has been you guys defending him. Concordance is doing this, Null Plum is doing this, and they're really doing it because it looks like to me, to them, atheism is more important than truth. Atheism is more important than any kind of a moral stand that you take to bolster the idea that this community actually has some sort of ethics behind it. And that's part of the reason I've been doing this lately. I find it comical that all of you are talking about ethics, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and all these kinds of things, but when it happens to Sean Venom Fang X, you're okay with it. When he spews pseudoscientific and just flat out wrong concepts like sexual dimorphism explains why women don't go into STEM fields, or that somehow, some way, women are asking to be raped because of body language. All these bad ideas that he has put forward, unsourced, uncited, might I add. All these things are okay because we're defending free speech and he's promoting atheism, and that's why he's gotten a pass. I compared this in the other video to the same thing that Catholic Church priests did by hiding pedophiles, who then went on to victimize hundreds, sometimes many hundreds, of more people, of which are still being dealt with today. That is unacceptable in that context. But this community is doing the same thing with people like Phil Mason, with Sargon of Akkad, with Paul Elam, these individuals, who spout these ridiculous ideas that have no basis in fact, who don't source their information, who just pronounce something and people accept it. Phil Mason is a liar. Phil Mason has broken the law. Phil Mason is a rape apologist. Phil Mason is an Islamophobe and a bigot. Phil Mason is nothing more than a charlatan. and you guys are defending him. Why? We take his logic and apply it to this situation. We shouldn't have to defend it, because according to all of you, by your silence, you have actually given tacit acceptance of it. If it wasn't okay for Phil Mason to get Venom Fang X fired from his job, or the YouTube atheists to dock drop Venom Fang X like Jordan Owen and the other people who were responsible for it, who did it en masse, if that's not okay, why are you defending it? If these things that have been done violate your ethics, why now are you so concerned with it when the same thing could happen to Phil Mason? You accepted it the first time around because it was your ideological enemy, but now you're raising holy Cain about it. Because this is unacceptable. Oh, it's his free speech is being violated. Didn't Venom Fang X have a right to free speech too? Didn't he have a right to be able to earn employment at the same time spreading what he believed to be the truth, as absurd as that truth may be? Exactly what did he do that was so horrible, according to you? Or are you saying that our political beliefs and how we enact them are separate from our jobs? And if so, when we mix the two, we are responsible for the consequences contained therein. What exactly are all of you saying? Because at this point, I don't see any consistency here. It seems like ad hoc rationalizations or post hoc rationalizations to try and dismiss what Phil has done as being just misunderstood. And that's not the case. So when I hear people talk about this is violation of ethics or free speech, it's laughable because the people saying it have routinely went along with him doing it. And other people doing it too, like Jordan Owen. So now all of you are irate about the fact that Phil Mason might have to face the consequences, which according to his own logic he has to face because it's his fault. You're upset about that possibly happening based on the idea that he has free speech. But he doesn't have a right to break the laws of another country, no matter what. It doesn't matter what this UN Charter says. I would love it if that applied to everything, but it doesn't. And by the way, I find this raising of free speech up to be this most important aspect of everything that goes on in terms of human rights, also to be disingenuous and comical. That UN Charter also talks about people being able to live their lives without fear of persecution or murder or genocide or anything like that. It's right there in the convention itself. And yet, you guys don't seem to be bothered by what happened in South Sudan and continues to happen in the South Sudan. Nobody seems particularly bothered by what's going on in Syria with ISIS. They might cry out every now and then, but quickly it's forgotten. Certainly nobody cares about the 10 million dead people in the Congo, all of which had a right to life, liberty, and property according to you and that UN Charter that should have been defended, but we did nothing. And I don't see anybody raising hell about it now. So this idea that all of you are defending free speech on principle is a selective thing. It's only so far as you think it can promote your atheism, which is the least important thing on the planet as far as I'm concerned. So let's look at this now. All of you defend this idea that atheists are these enlightened intellectual people defending freedom, truth, and apple pie from the evil forces of feminism and Marxism or whatever the hell boogeyman you guys have come up with this week to try and convince people that they are this close to losing all their freedoms. You believe that's what you're doing, when in fact you are doing the same things you accuse your ideological opponents of doing. And you're defending those things also by your silence and by not calling someone like Phil Mason out for what he's done. And then you have the nerve to complain that when Phil, for the first time, faces potential consequences for the reprehensible things he does, we're violating his free speech. But by his own logic, that's not what's going on. He should have known better. If he didn't want to be prosecuted for something like this, he shouldn't have done it. The same way a rape victim shouldn't wear a short skirt so long as she's going out to a bar and drinking and being around strange men. If she gets raped, it's her fault. She gave off victim language. So Phil right now is giving off victim language. Well, let's also face it, he is a professional victim himself. Recently he attempted to quote mine and take me out of context to try and make it look like I was attempting to victimize him, which that was not the case. Phil lied. Phil continues to lie. Phil is a liar. He's always been a liar. He's always been a scumbag. He's always been somebody who could not be believed. And you guys are sticking up for that guy. Why? Why is it that you are protecting this human being? Other than the fact that apparently your atheism trumps any ideas towards morality or ethics that you're going through. Now, one of the advantages of doing it this way that I decided to do was to try to bring the conversation to this discussion, to this point. All of you are irate about this. You say that we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, but you don't do it yourselves. None of you hold yourselves to the standard. You hold yourself to Phil's standard, where you basically think everything's okay as long as the ideological enemy is the ideological enemy, then it's okay. Then you're fine with it. Jordan Owen does it. Phil Mason does it. Completely okay. Paul Elam creates a list where you can register a woman that you don't like. Okay. Nobody has a problem with these things until suddenly it's a prominent YouTube user who is a scumbag, a rape apologist, an Islamophobe, and a bigot. Then you get irate about it because suddenly you feel like defending him is the most important thing. You guys already compromised your so-called ethics, which were non-existent in the first place, a long time ago. Now we're just talking about a matter of degree. Suddenly you want rules to be involved. Suddenly you guys want there to be something called ethics in this, that maybe people shouldn't take certain actions because it's a step too far. But you were silent when he did it. And now you expect the rest of us to sit here and take you seriously when you are clearly okay with this kind of thing. Long time ago, 2 years ago, when I told Exile to fuck off, and most of the sex-positive feminists that I was involved in, I warned them about escalation because they were getting into bed with John, the other one, in the MRAs. I told them if they kept this up, people would escalate things out of control and then it would just be a free-for-all. And that's what's happened now. Everything is game. Everything goes. Anything is possible. Anything is allowed. Everything. Nothing is real. Everything is permissible, as they said in Assassin's Creed. And it's not because of Bewildered Ape or anybody like that. It's because all of you failed. You failed to apply your principles equally across the board. It doesn't matter if Venom Fang X was your ideological enemy. You people should have done something when Phil did what he did, and that other atheists have done what they have done. Doc dropping, harassing people, going after them. Now you sit there and have the nerve to talk about ethics and morality and free speech when you've done nothing to defend it. And that's why that quote's at the beginning of this. You guys don't really love freedom. You love license. You want to be able to do whatever the hell you want. And I do understand that the internet's always had a libertarian bend to it. But these ideas are stupid without any kind of ethical or moral consideration behind it. And that's what is so comical about this. That's kind of what I wanted to bring to a boil here, to finally show people what's going on. All of you want rules, except for when it comes to all of you. Everybody else must be governed by those rules, except for all of you. That sounds a lot like some sort of aristocratic order as opposed to some sort of egalitarian movement. Phil Mason gets a different set of rules because he's a big YouTuber. That's it. And he promotes this idea of science and reason, which he doesn't really promote because the pseudoscientific ideas and the things he does undermine those things. So he gets a pass. Jordan Owen gets a pass. Noel Plum gets a pass for believing in things like EvoPsych and doing things like MRA Light. And being an anti-theist, might I add. Let's look at that for a moment also. It's not like you can't criticize religion. But acting like the religious and trying to stamp out all religion is just as bad. And I hate to tell everybody this, it's not going anywhere. I would also point out up until the last 1,000 years, religion was pretty much a completely benign force in people's lives until now. What changed? What happened? What's causing this? Well, weaponization of religion is part of it. Politicalization is part of it, as Klingshore has put forward in some of his videos. The guys who shot up Charlie Hebdo, which I'll talk about here in a second, they were not just driven by Islam. They were driven by U.S. foreign policy, like the torturing of prisoners. This is something that's common with terrorism. Now, this is also one of the reasons that I find Phil's outrage over something like what happened at Charlie Hebdo to also be disingenuous and stupid. Phil said himself, even in his own video, that he didn't shed one tear for anybody who died in the Holocaust. That's all well and good. I can understand that. He probably didn't know anybody, and very few of us do. But when Charlie Hebdo was shot up, boy, was he irate. Suddenly, he was the champion of free speech and standing for Western values, even though he's done everything he can to undermine those values, including undermining free speech. Or have all of you forgotten when Phil's images were put onto those pornographic images by Silver and then photoshopped and put up, that he DMCA'd Coughlin and got his videos flagged to try and get them shut down. And no, I don't want to hear this argument that this was somehow slanderous. It was satire. And satire can be quite vicious. Please read the published works of Juvenal if you don't believe satire can't be vicious. But that was Coughlin's free speech. Not that he was actually responsible for it, because he wasn't, and Phil knew that, but still went after him. But he still DMCA'd him. He still went after him. He still tried to shut his channel down. That was his free speech. It's my free speech to be able to say that Phil Mason is a cur, and a bastard, and a piece of shit. Now, the attempts to try and say that there was physical violence threat against him were nonsense, of course. But even if you do that, you have to use Phil's logic once again. According to him, all threats of violence are meaningless. Therefore, you have to ignore them. That's what he said to Anita Sarkeesian. So people can say whatever the hell they want. I mean, is there any consistency to what you guys understand to be about free speech and anything of this nature? Or is it just wherever you can defend you? Or wherever you think you can take an advantage of it, that kind of thing. If this is really about free speech, I would like to see that applied across the board. It wasn't applied to Coughlin, wasn't applied to Sean. It's not been applied to the people that have been hunted and harassed by Thunderfoot fans and other people like in Gamergate, who've had their docs dropped, who've been DMCA'd, who've had their videos flagged. Where is the consistency in this? Don't talk to me about morality and ethics when you guys don't have any, or promote any. This is what I meant by you should have reined this guy in a long time ago. Now look, everything is escalated out of control. Everything is being permissible because none of you managed to take a stand against it. So don't give me this bullshit about free speech. You no more care about free speech than you care about the 10 million dead people in the Congo, or the people that are dying daily in Syria, or really about Charlie Hebdo. Don't sit there and tell me somebody like Phil doesn't shed one tear for anybody in the Holocaust and then say he suddenly cares about all those journalists who were killed at Charlie Hebdo, when I know he doesn't shed one damn tear for them either. They were convenient for him to use against Islam, but that's it. So where is the consistency in all of this? Free speech, my ass. It's about license. And nobody has called you assholes out on it, because they're all too afraid to, apparently. And you guys are too much of a bunch of cowards to rein Phil in. That's why you fail. That's why this whole idea has failed. Fuck Pascal's wager. All of you should have been doing something to police your own a long fucking time ago, long before I was even on this channel or on this site. But you didn't. And now the Leviathan has grown far out of control. And now you're upset that he might face consequences that he alone is responsible for according to his own logic. That's what you're doing at this point. If you really cared about free speech, you would have long ago done something to rein this guy in, because he has been a biggest violator of that principle. And he has done everything he can to silence people, including weaponizing his own subscribership. And if you guys think he doesn't do that, you're out of your mind. He does it deliberately. Notice how, though Phil doesn't deal with anything himself, he never showed up in the comment section of my video or anybody else's video except for one person's. He's not going to deal with any of the science that I've used to debunk his bullshit. Neither are any of you, for that matter, because you don't fucking know what you're talking about. All of mine is scientifically sourced. Everything I do is cited. Phil doesn't do that. So either he's a scientist or he's a political commentator. He can't be both and then claim to have no responsibility in what he says, or that responsibility when it comes to his job doesn't also entail that. Apparently it didn't for Sean. Now, you guys can try to explain to me this bullshit yourselves, but don't pretend like this is about anything other than what you guys really want. License to say whatever the hell you want without consequence, and that is not possible either. For everybody else who isn't a hypocrite, thank you and good night.